Joining me today is the co-founder of comicbook.com and current VP of Business Development over at Image Comics. He is also the producer and host of the recently revived Let's Talk Comics, which brings comic book creators on to discuss their journey into comics, in-depth conversations about their current work, and everything else in between. It is my pleasure to welcome Jim Viscardi onto the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Very good, Jim. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
What a pleasure it is to get
What
you
an
here.
intro.
That's always my favorite reaction when we bring people on is we give these like, and here's this is a weird sidebar as soon as we start the conversation, but I feel like I can share this with you because
Of course.
you are a fellow podcaster.
Right.
I sort of stole this method from Pat McAfee, who I'm not like a giant fan of. I don't really watch his show. I've seen it a couple times. I actually watched it a lot when he first had like the original Indianapolis Barstool back in like the 2010 aughts, somewhere in that range. And he used to bring people in with these super long-winded, very like verbose intros. And I was like, you know what? And then when we started the podcast here, the Oblivion Bar, in April of 2020, I was like, you know what? These comic creators, these folks that we get on the show, they're sitting in a room, drawing, writing, what have you, all the time by themselves. I'm going to really like prop them up when we're here.
Yeah.
And people always seem to like it.
Look, I take every cue for everything I do.
Uh-huh.
I steal it all from wrestling. And intros they are important.
Yeah.
If you're not hyping up who you've got on the show, then your audience isn't going to give two craps about who they are. I don't know if I can curse or not, so I'm going to.
No, you totally can. Yeah, please do.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It's just it's late, and then at this point my inner Long Island comes out, and I'm gonna behave, but
No, please let it all hang loose. The Oblivion Bar, it is the Oblivion Bar After Dark here. And then, what's funny is that you bring up wrestling and how much you love it. It deals with my first question that I have for you here. And I want to get into the most important stuff. We'll get into Let's Talk Comics and your history in comics and all the things.
Who gives a shit about that? Let's talk about wrestling.
You recently shared a photo of you and I'm guessing your daughter at WWE Monday Night Raw. That was, at the time of this recording, that was only maybe a couple days ago, maybe yesterday. I can't remember.
Yep, yesterday.
Was that her first experience at Monday Night Raw?
No, we've been let's see. It must have been her third event, maybe fourth event. We did a TNA show. We went to a TNA show when they did a lot of shows out here closer to around the pandemic because they were doing stuff out of Skyway Studios here. And a friend of mine is Eric Young, who wrestles for them. And so he always got us in. And then I think we did a Raw, and then we did a SmackDown, and this will be her second Raw. So 3 WWE events. And honestly, it's one of those things where I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. My kid doesn't necessarily care about watching wrestling too much. She likes watching the pay-per-views. She is pretty much like, she really only likes watching, women's wrestling matches. But going to a live wrestling event is an experience unlike anything else. If you don't like wrestling, or you don't get what wrestling is about or whatever, you will never fully understand it if you only watch it. You will only fully understand it if you go to an event and see it in person. It's better than going to a football game. It's better than going to any live sports. It is truly the total package. And so now for me to see it through her eyes, because she's totally bought in on the face and heel side of things. She's rooting for good guys and bad guys and whatever, and she knows all of that stuff. But to her, she understands that these wrestlers are playing characters, right? She knows Chelsea Green is not a bad person, but will boo her because she knows she's the bad, she's the heel in the situation.
Yeah.
And so to see that and get to experience that with her is such a blessing for me, because it really is something special. We had phenomenal seats last night, and I never take it for granted. I have been able to meet and meet a lot of people, make a lot of friends in the business during my time at comicbook.com. One of them, I'm going to sound like a name drop all the time on the show. And I'm sorry. It helps put into context.
I actually do that too with comic creators. I'm like, oh yeah, I was talking to Christian Ward the other day, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, whatever.
So Cody Rhodes is someone who, happens to now be the face of WWE, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He is someone that I have interviewed time and time again over the last 15 to 20 years in his career. So way back when I used to work for Marvel. And when I was doing that, we had really gotten we learned and figured out that a lot of wrestlers are big superhero fans, big comic book nerds. And I tell people all the time, wrestling is just live action comics.
Yeah.
It's
a power
fictionalized,
fantasy.
serialized storytelling, good guys and bad guys, funny costumes. It's it's comics, right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so Cody was just getting his start over there, and in his gear started to do some callbacks to some comic stuff. He had a vest where he would invoke Archangel sometimes, Magneto sometimes, and a few other things. And so he and I became like his go-to nerd interview person for that stuff. And so I interviewed him a few times for Marvel.com. And then when I left to go to comic book, he had left WWE and was in his ROH and TNA and independent circuit days, his Japan stuff. And I've interviewed him all through that, and then basically now up and through this. And so now I'm really fortunate that anytime WWE comes to town, I can call on my personal, very close best friend Cody Rhodes and say, "Hey, can I get some tickets?" And you get some damn good tickets when that happens.
That's awesome. That's cool. It's good to know people, and it's cool. Also, I think from a more not only from a fan perspective, but from a friend point of view, when you see these people that you make connections with, that you watch them. You see that stock rise,
It's been my entire career. It's one of the biggest reasons why I'm so excited to be back at Image now. Or not be back at Image, be at Image, but back in comics now.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting to work with so many creators who I got to work with in the very early part of their careers when they were just getting in at Marvel, and or DC, right? Jason Aaron, Kieran Gillen, the Rick Remender, the list kind of goes on and on. All of those creators are putting out new work at Image, and it's, and they've only grown as a creator during that time. And so now I'm getting to help, instead of helping them promote their work for hire stuff when I was at Marvel, I'm helping them promote their babies, basically, right? In Image, there's a totally different level of involvement and things in that nature. And so it's become that much more gratifying in a sense for me and rewarding in that I get to do that now, having seen some of these creators, go through all of it.
Mm-hmm. I want to take a quick step back to wrestling just for a quick moment. Hopefully
Absolutely.
I can do that. I wanted to ask you about all of that from, WWE Raw the other days, because I recently watched the Mr. McMahon miniseries on Netflix. I'm sure you probably watched that one as well. And it took me back because I was a huge wrestling fan growing up. I'm 33, so I'm of that age where the Attitude Era, and I think going into the Ruthless Aggression era, that was sort of where I maybe dropped off halfway through the Ruthless Aggression era. And watching it really invigorated something in me to sort of go back and see or I guess not go back, but go into what's currently happening with the WWE and with the current reshuffling of Monday Night Raw being on Netflix. And I obviously have Netflix because I watched that Mr. McMahon doc. So I was going to watch that first episode. And I hate to disappoint you, Jim, here in our first time meeting on the Oblivion Bar. But when I watched it, I was I understood the appeal.
That first episode was a commercial. That's
Thank you.
The entire thing was a commercial, right?
They had sponsors in the ring, on the mat.
Well, but look, I think it's one of those things where it's really weird, right? Because here is this thing that has often been seen as a sideshow, right? A traveling circus, if you will, and now is being even further legitimized in a way by, in a sense, by being on streaming, reaching a huge audience. And so, that stuff costs money. And so that means they got to stick a logo in the middle of the ring or in the turnbuckles. I get it. Yeah. I get it. Someone's got to get paid. But it's so weird because for the longest time, and it sounds crazy to say, but like wrestling was niche in a sense, or had a stereotype. A certain person watched wrestling and no one, and then it was like, wrestling's fake, right? It's like, all right, you take a back body drop and you tell me that's fake, right? Okay.
You take a DDT.
You go through a table and you tell me, that's fake, right?
Yeah.
And so no one wanted to, like, everyone understood it, but no one wanted to, because the outcomes aren't real, right? And for me, wrestling is so much more than that. There's so much storytelling that goes on. And like, are you going to get your weird costume characters doing weird, crazy shit? Absolutely. But like the last 3 years of the Bloodline story has been some of the best television anyone has ever. I put it up against Severance. Like, whatever. I don't care.
Is that the Roman Reigns?
That's the Roman Reigns stuff.
Okay. Yeah, see, I was watching this and I'm like, what is, is he related to all these people?
It has been hands down one of the strongest. And without that storyline, WWE doesn't get to Netflix, in my opinion, right? Without Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman and Cody Rhodes and all those guys doing what they're doing, it doesn't get to Netflix. And I think that's it, right? I think people are starting to realize that some of the storytelling that goes on in this, not only just in like the actual stories or whatever, but the stories that get told during matches, right? And how a wrestling match can tell a story is fascinating stuff. And now that it's like, people always like to say, nothing will top the Attitude Era. And I hate to tell you, that is nostalgia speaking, and it is a potent drug, and you need to cut the supply, open your eyes, and realize that, no, wrestling right now is the biggest it's ever been.
Yeah.
And more people are coming to the table, and more people are wanting to come and experience it. And again, right, that's one of those things where I say, if there's a wrestling event that is coming to your town, go. It will 100% make you a fan immediately. And if not just like a fan to watch week to week, it will make you appreciate what goes on and how it all comes together.
It's funny you say that.
I will step off my soapbox.
No, I set you up for it, and it's fine. I'm glad you did, because after watching that WWE Raw, it was obviously being promoted that the Royal Rumble was coming to Indianapolis. That's where I currently live. Yep. It was coming to Lucas Oil, and I thought to myself, again, watching the Mr. McMahon doc, and then seeing the sort of, as you said, sort of the upgrade in everything with the WWE, and in terms of like broadcasting, and everything just looks way better than it used to. I thought, it'd be fun to just go to an event and see if maybe that changes my mind, because while I agree with you that like people need to hop off the Attitude Era IV that they've been, that Kool-Aid they've been sipping on, things can progress and whatnot. I wanted to see it for myself, and I went to, maybe this was stupid of me, but I went to like Ticketmaster, StubHub, and for like the worst tickets to Royal Rumble, I'm talking nosebleeds, and Lucas Oil holds, I want to say like 88 to 90,000 people in its stadium. Worst seats, nosebleeds, were 496 with fees. Per ticket. And I was like, what are we doing here? It's a tough one,
because Royal Rumble, to me, is basically WrestleMania. Like, I love the Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble is, of the pay-per-views over the year, it's WrestleMania obviously is the granddaddy of them all. But like, gun to my head, I had to pick one to go to, I'm going to the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Like that Royal Rumble match is so unique, and just there's nothing like the anticipation of that countdown. That countdown hits, you don't know who's coming, and if it's going to be like a Hall of Famer or someone's making their debut or whatever, I don't care. Like I was at the one that Edge came back at, and when I tell you, there's the saying, like, the roof is going to pop off this place. I legitimately thought the roof was going to come off.
Yeah.
Like, that's how loud of a reaction he got. And as someone who, loves Edge and loved him, during the Attitude Era and beyond, like, that was, no one thought we were going to get that again. Like, there were rumors and things like that he was coming back, but like, his injury was one of those career-ending injuries, and there was no way he was going to do it, and he did, and it was great.
Is that
it was the neck?
Yeah. I thought that was what it was. Yeah.
And so I'm not. I mean, It sucks that they were that expensive, but I'm not surprised.
Okay, let me ask you one more wrestling related question before we move
All
on.
right.
Favorite Attitude Era wrestler, and then favorite current wrestler today.
Oh God, you can't ask me that one. Only because I love truly terrible Attitude Era wrestlers.
Yeah,
Rikishi.
No.
Okay. I am probably the only person who will pick Hardcore Holly.
Oh wow, with the head?
No, that was Al Snow.
Al
Hardcore
Snow, that's
Holly.
right, yeah.
Hardcore Holly was even more boring than that. He was just. God, I don't. There was just some about him that I absolutely loved. And Goldust, I really love Goldust.
Oh
and,
yeah,
and to see
the multitude of different versions of Goldust.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. And to see Dustin Rhodes kind of end up where he's at now with that character is phenomenal. But like, those are like my two favorites. So, like, yeah, sure. Do I love Stone Cold? Absolutely. Oh, I want to say like. Of the three, like the holy trinity of like the big three or whatever, like Triple H, The Rock, and Stone Cold, I will always stand for Triple H.
Sure. Yeah, and he's still making the impact today, right?
And he's still making the impact.
Yeah, he's the one running the show, essentially, of what it sounds like. And it's funny you say that. I don't know if he's still around today, but Chris Jericho was my favorite as a kid.
Oh, yeah, he's over there in AEW doing some stuff. Chris Jericho was great. Today, man, that's also a tough one. It sounds super biased only because I've known him for so long, but like Cody's must-see TV. I'd say like right now, though, like in the moment, and I got to experience a bit of it yesterday, how over Jey Uso is. I mean, he comes out and that entire arena is yeeting their way to the thing, and like, and his entrance yesterday was like 5 extra minutes long, and my kid is just going boom, yeet, yeet, and it was great. That's the most over thing right now.
Yeah. Growing up, the only one that I went to was SmackDown, and it was at RCA Dome, if you remember that. That was the stadium before Lucas Oil here in Indy.
Yep.
But yeah, it was a random SmackDown. It was cool. But all right, I think we've done enough wrestling conversation.
It's safe to come back now. We're going to talk about comics.
Everybody that came here to hear us talk about comics and podcasting, tune in because, Jim, since co-creating the site and a decade plus over at comicbook.com, you've recently again made that switch over to Image Comics, accepting that position as the head of business development. So it's been about a year since that was announced, and you've taken on this new role with Image. Year in April. How's that transition been for you so far?
Oh, it's been phenomenal. It was starting Comic Book was, to me, looking back on it, like a once in a lifetime kind of experience. Mm-hmm. The early years sucked. In a sense, where I didn't know necessarily what I was getting myself into. It was an experience that has afforded me so many once in a lifetime ish kind of things. For a lot, like even for just like even kind of for anyone in a sense. Getting the opportunity to go to movie sets and see how those get put together, to go to junkets and do some interviews with, some bucket list people. I've loved Joaquin Phoenix for a really long time. Did I ever think I'd have the opportunity to interview him? No, absolutely not. More than that, did I ever think I had the opportunity to make him chuckle? No, and I did for Joker, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But more importantly, the team that I was able to put together there is hands down, I will say, is one of the best digital editorial teams that anyone could ever ask for. And I have seen that digital business change a lot over 10 years, right? Because the hardest part of that is there is so much of it that's not in your control. Where you're at the whim of distribution algorithms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Google or whatever, really managing that stuff, managing the flow of your traffic, especially in the early years, is hard because you're not a destination yet. You're not someone, you're not a place where people can go to reliably for X, Y, or Z. And so we had to figure out what our niche was going to be when we started it. And so the site got started at a time when Avengers had just come out. Age of Ultron was about to release maybe a little bit. And you either had comic book sites like CBR, where they were very much a comic book site and not necessarily a movie and TV site, or you had movie and TV sites, and you didn't have anything in between. And so I took some advice I had gotten when I was at Marvel in promoting some of those books and applied it to like the ethos of what the early days of comic book would become, where we were going to be the in-between site. That was the void we were going to fill. We were going to be the place that was new reader friendly in a sense. So someone who sees Thanos at the end of the movie in the post-credits scene has no idea who Thanos is, but needs to bone up and learn so they can tell their friends and be the smartest person in their friend group, can come to comic book and figure that out and understand why. But also comic book will be the place that tells you why Thanos in the MCU is a huge deal. And then on the flip side of that, here are some great Thanos stories that like the new reader can go read to catch up, but here are the must-read Thanos stories that we think is going to influence whatever character's role in the MCU is going to be. And there was nothing like that at the time. Also at the time, everyone was writing these very long articles buried under not so great headlines. And if an interview had come out with a star or a comic creator or whatever, so much good stuff would get lost in a bad headline. And we would look at that stuff as like a Christmas dinner turkey, and we would carve it up until there was nothing but the bones left. And we bite-size served all of it. So if there were 3 really good things said in that one big interview, it was going to be 3 different stories on comicbook.com. It was going to be my thought process was, if someone were to just come to comicbook.com and just scroll, get 2 or 3 swipes of the homepage, they would feel caught up. And if they wanted to dive deeper, they could. If they had an extended bathroom break, they could read an article or two, or whatever, right? And that was that was the foundation in which we built it on, and it worked. And it's what people wanted. And so I learned so much about audience development in a sense, right? And how, a lot of people like to throw the phrase clickbait around and things like that. And it's like, look. Just because you had to click into a story to read what someone said or whatever, like, every headline is clickbait, right? Like, and so like you're not, clickbait is if you click into something and you don't get what you're looking for, right? That is clickbait. If something is obscured in a headline because the person wants you to click in to read to find out, 1, clearly you're interested because you want to find out. 2, you're going to get your answer. It's not clickbait. If we don't tell you X character shows up in a thing, but we tell you a very important character is going to show up, we're not going to put that spoiler out in the headline. We're going to put it in the story. We're going to bury it.
Isn't that the point of a headline too, right?
That's the whole point of a headline. The whole point of a headline.
Right.
Like, have you not opened up? That's going to sound crazy, right? Like, have you not opened up a newspaper? Like, you're reading a headline. If you want to find out more, like, it needs to catch your eye. But the explosion of social media happened over the course of those 10 years. Twitter changed immensely. Facebook changed immensely. And they almost became echo chambers in a way, right? Like, you had the whole Snyderverse cult grow kind of out of that. And you really got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of what these platforms then had to offer. And so it became hard, right, and interesting. And so but then at that point, like, we grow our video operations, we do some podcasts, we get bought by Paramount, which or at the time was just CBS, but we I inevitably start working for Paramount, and then we become a soft marketing arm for the company, just to make sure that, like, we can get stuff, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trailers and things like that. Whatever, that's fine.
Yep.
But we always had our independence, right? Like, if we didn't like Turtles, we could say we didn't like Turtles. They never got involved with us that way. But the thing that begins to drain on you is the news cycle. And it is. I just turned 37, and so I'm not. That is a young person's game. And like I had believe me, don't get me wrong. Again, I had the best team in the business to do it, and I didn't have to worry about it necessarily as much as I got older and got through it. But like those early days, like if you're not first, you're last in a sense. And so if news broke, you needed to get it up. It needed to come out. All of that stuff needed to happen immediately. And like I said, like those early days were tough. They were long hours. It wasn't great for my mental health. It wasn't great for my personal relationships because I needed this to be a success. I had already devoted so much to it. I obviously had equity in it. And so the ultimate goal was to sell it. If it didn't work, I would have wasted X amount of years of a career not really doing much of anything. And so I needed it to work. And so like I said, I got to travel the world because of it. I got to moderate a ton of panels, which I love doing. I got to help people who inevitably would become friends of mine, like make sure that people, paid attention to some of their projects that they were putting out. And so it was super gratifying. And a lot of people say, oh, it's a very powerful position. I was like, okay, that's like weird conspiracy shit. Yeah, sure. Right, did I have the biggest comic book site in the industry? Yes. Yeah. Did I have a site that was as big as the Hollywood Reporter and Variety at one point? Yes, absolutely. Did I take any of it for granted? No. But inevitably, my heart was always in comics. And it was as the site began, the movie and TV stuff started drawing the most traffic. I always needed to make sure that there was still very solid, competent comics coverage on the site. We were when IGN used to review every comic book that came out on a Wednesday. When they stopped, I said, we're doing it now. And
we're going to fill that void really quick.
We're going to, right. And we did basically bullet reviews for every Marvel and DC book, almost every Image book. And then, the bigger of the other smaller independent publishers, because for me as a comic book reader, as a fan growing up, like I got into comics late. I didn't get into comics until 2008 when Ed Brubaker killed Captain America, and I saw it. It was front page of the Daily News. I was living in New York City at the time. It was on every news channel. My parents are calling me about it, asking me what the hell is going on, and I'm like, I don't know. But like them being able to get that mainstream with that kind of story that came out of the comics made me want to do what I inevitably made my career out of. I wanted to bring. I was always a superhero fan growing up. I loved, Marvel and DC stuff. I just didn't really read the comics. Like I read a few here and there, and then, but like that was the moment. Captain America 25. I read everything. I went to Midtown Comics. I subscribed to. I said, give me every book that's coming out of Civil War. It was the Initiative era. It was Avengers Academy. I was like, give me everything, and then I read everything back. Basically as far back as I could, and I picked and choose like where I was going to go or whatever, but like that's where I got started. And like it's the thing I tell like wrestling fans, like you don't need the history. Like the history helps, but like jump in. If you're going to get a good story, great, and then comics will give you an experience like nothing else. Yeah. There is no medium that can do what comics does. And when you see how a good story is told in comics, you will be hooked forever. And so my love for comics is like, even though I came to it later, what rooted itself so deep into my entire personality that I needed to make sure that coverage remained on comics. And so because of that, I got to meet people like Robert Kirkman and Todd McFarlane and Eric Stevenson and Rob Liefeld and all that, who I got to a point in my comic book career. And I have been talking for a very long time, so I am sorry. I got to a point in my comicbook.com career where the burnout was really starting to set in. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be doing more in comics. And you ask anyone who has gotten out of comics and gotten a, quote, big boy job, why someone would go back to comics. You only go back to comics if you absolutely love comics. And I absolutely love comics. I love every single aspect of it. I love the creators that are putting these stories together. I love the stories that are coming out from these creators. I love the direct market. The direct market is the only retail system in place that exists as it does. Mm-hmm. You've got your hobby shops and you've got your card shops and things like that, but there is nothing like the direct market. And comic shops for a very long time have gotten a real bad rap. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some not great comic book shops, but for every not great comic book shops, I guarantee you there are 2 or 3 really fucking good ones. Mm-hmm. And once you find one of those, that's it, game over. You're there, and the communities that pop out from them, that's what it's about, right? And no matter at the end of the day, you can have your Discords, you can have your Facebook groups, you can have your online communities. Those are all very, very important. Don't get me wrong. Reddit, right? Absolutely. But there's nothing like getting together with friends, hanging out in a comic book shop every Wednesday, talking about new books, talking about what's going on or whatever. There's nothing like it. Mm-hmm. And so when the opportunity, there was an opportunity that came up at Image that was like, hey, we would love to have someone who has your skill set to do X, Y, or Z, X, Y, and Z of these things. And it was like, it was build more community. It was reinforce the Image brand. It was, help creators like really like get an understanding of like social media and new promotion and new media promotion and things like that. And they're like, you've done all of that. I was like, yes, I have. And I was like, I would love nothing more. Say less, I'm in, basically. Right.
Yeah.
And so now I get to say, not only do I get to say like, my bosses are now Todd McFarlane, Robert Kirkman, Eric Stevenson, Eric Larson, and that group, right? But like they're also my coworkers, which is
their peers.
It's like boom, right? and so like to be able to like hop on the phone and talk to Todd about how to promote an upcoming issue of Spawn or a new book that he's got coming out, fucking pinch me, right?
Only in comics.
Only in comics, yeah. And so I'm so. Again, I am so blessed because I know this is a position and it's a career that so many people would legitimately take my life for and just body snatch me and replace me and whatever. And so to be able to do what I do is truly a godsend, and I love it. And it honestly, the biggest thing that being at Image now lets me do is it lets me be creative again. Mm-hmm. In working on the social for Image and doing the podcast and coming up with ways to get people excited about stuff flexes a creativity muscle that I have not been working out for a while because I got so caught up in the last days of comic book doing a bunch of real boring middle management bullshit. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that answers the question.
I think there's a lot to chew on there, and I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad I got the long version because I feel like there's so much we can build from there. I do want to say firstly that like I'm in the same boat as you. Growing up, I was someone who was constantly loving some form of comic book related media, but not reading comics until I got into about high school. So similar time frame, I'd say like around 2008 to 2010 era, somewhere in that range. It was actually for me, it was the Court of Owls storyline with Snyder and Capullo.
That was right there, yeah.
Yeah. That was the first book that I ever put on a pull. It was the first book that I went to my comic shop each month, for the new issue, and it just sort of built from there.
Scott's earlier run on Detective, to me, is still some of the best Batman stories ever told. Yeah, Black Mirror, all that. So good.
Oh, yeah. And, I've talked to Scott here on the show. I'm sure you've talked to him at some point throughout your career, and it's funny to hear him talk about that time era because he still to this day says, I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have been writing the book. They didn't give me any sort of prompt on what to do next. So I just sort of made Dick Batman and then made Commissioner Gordon's son crazy. And then we went from there. Right. And it's just, I sort of love that sort of serendipity within comics and you sort of articulate it really well. And I want to sort of echo it all is that when it comes to working in comics, and I don't want to pretend that the Oblivion Bar is like, comic journalism. We are so not that. We are, I think, what best describes the Oblivion Bar is we are just sort of a hub for celebration. We want to promote the medium, and that's what we have to do. I think if you could take anything from what Jim, what you just said there, and what I often will try to promote here on the podcast is that if we want good in the world of comics, if we want good in the medium, we have to be the ones that put that out there.
100%.
Because there are people, like you were saying when you worked at comicbook.com, and not all Snyder Bros are jerks, but let's be honest, a lot of them kind of were in some capacity or another. And there are people out there that will hate read books and then complain about them on the internet. And some people who aren't privy to like comic book discourse or where to find proper comic book dialogue think that is what fandom is. And it's so not. What you're doing at Let's Talk Comics and what I hope we're doing here at the Oblivion Bar, what Brad and Lisa are doing at the Comic Book Couples Counseling, what Greg and company are doing at the First Issue Club, Botter and company are doing at the Short Box, and so on. What we're all trying to do, and this is my long-winded response to yours, is that we're all just trying to participate in this in some way, in some fashion, to show that comics are fucking awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, look, that you're so right in that it's there. This is an industry that loves to talk about its doom and gloom more than anything I've ever seen before, right? Yeah. Every fucking day, the comic book industry is
the margins.
The margins, yeah. And there's just to go back to use a wrestling term, right? Like there's a wrestling term for fans who think they know how the business is run. They're called smart marks. And mark is more usually used as a derogatory term, as like someone who thinks they know but they don't know, and like they got by the story in a sense, right? Smart marks are even worse because they think they know how the story is going to go, and they're going to tell people, well, this is how it's supposed to be and this is what's going to happen, and then when it doesn't happen they look like assholes. There's a lot of that in comics where I think but I think it's all, I think at the end of the day it all comes from a good place. I think people just, they want to feel included. They want to, they see comics as potentially being a home for them to find some friends and things like that. And so there's always going to be the friend in a group that knows everything. And I think everyone always wants to be the person that someone has to go to for knowledge, right? And comics, unfortunately, for whatever reason, can sometimes be a bad place where bad actors kind of come in, and the grift happens, and we've seen them come, we've seen them go. They will always exist. They exist in every industry. It's not, but I think for comics, they get a bit more of a magnifying glass put on them because it's just that much smaller of an industry. But inevitably at the end of the day, here's a good example. I did an interview on CBS News about where the question that gets thrown all the time when they talk to someone who's a professional geek in the space is, well, talk to me about superhero fatigue. Like, is it real? I was like, and my go-to line is, no, there's not superhero fatigue. There is mediocre content fatigue, right?
Quality fatigue.
There is too much mediocre bullshit, whether it is on television, on your streaming service, movies being put out, and comic books on your shelf. There is too much shit out there. And so people are tired of getting suckered into buying something they think is going to be quality and realizing it's not. I can't... Netflix cancels 30 shows a week, it feels like. And half of them you don't even know what they were. That they even had a season 1, let alone a season 2, right? Yeah. That needs to happen in other industries more, I think. It's so wild because during the pandemic, we're still feeling the ramifications of the pandemic in movies because there are still less movies coming out than there were before the pandemic. But for whatever reason, again, from a quality standpoint, it all just feels bleh, right?
There's something also the strikes last year too, as well.
Right, and then the strikes too, right? Yeah. Where it's stuff that's not actively bad, but there's also stuff that is not actively exciting. And so the problem is the good stuff, the really good stuff, gets lost in the mix. And so because it gets lost in the mix, it doesn't have the opportunity to thrive and survive. And so, there's no superhero fatigue. It's just we just need to get through this rut of of just mediocre content in a sense, right? And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but at Image, we got the goods. We got good shit.
Y'all got that good.
We got that good, right? I can list off any number of books that we're putting out, and I would put them toe-to-toe with 90% of the line that Marvel is putting out, 90% of the line DC is putting out. You will have more enjoyment reading the power fantasy, which is everything that Marvel told Kieran Gillen he couldn't do on X-Men, in this book, and it's better for it. Yeah. Bug Wars comes out this week. It's everything that Marvel told Jason and Mahmoud that they could not do in Conan. They are doing in Bug Wars, and it's better because of it. Mm-hmm. Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins is everything that Boom and Hasbro said he couldn't do in Power Rangers. He's doing in his own book, and it's better because of it. Right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those like now I'm about to like we're going to church right here in a sense.
Well, so real quick before you go on, there's no comparison to this, but I was reading Dennis Kemp's Assorted Crisis event, the first issue, and it's like incredible stuff. Yeah,
all of the big ideas that guy has that you see on display in Ultimates. Now look, don't get me wrong, Ultimates is a good book, and so like that's a book that like that pay attention to that book. That's a good one, right? But, like, you can see the big ideas happen in that book. And Assorted Crisis events, like, that book is not out yet, but it needs to be on your radar. Takes every good idea needs a boundary, right? Like, you need every world being created in these, every story needs rules.
Yeah.
And the way Dennis follows the rules he makes for the books he creates makes his books better. Mm-hmm. And he's got such big ideas, and when he's paired with an artist like Eric, it is a gorgeous.
Not to mention Jordy and Hassan. Like, come on,
right? And Jordy and Hassan, right? That's the other thing. there are so many talented people in this business. It is just freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Here's where I will probably get myself in some hot water. So I'm sorry. There are plenty of quote creator-owned publishers out there that are not creator-owned. They are creator participation, right? Your Booms, your Onis, your distilleries, whatever. Image is the only publisher that a creator comes in and they own everything, right? and it's crazy. Image has been around for 33 plus years. It's the same deal that the founders themselves put together for themselves is still the same deal today.
Yeah.
Right? Dennis Camp has the same deal as Todd McFarlane.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't exist anywhere else. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. Does that mean is a different set of challenges potentially doing a book at Image than potentially anywhere else? Yes, absolutely. Has there been a lot of changes to try and make some of those challenges easier? 100%. That's why I'm here. And don't get me wrong, the team that we've got there they're some of the best in the business. Alex Cox, who manages the direct market sales, Kat Salazar, who does PR, Margot Wood, who manages the book market, all under the leadership of Eric Stevenson. These are some very talented people with an insane amount of experience doing the good work, and it's the reason. I know we were going to get to this. The reason Let's Talk Comics is back is because if I were to do it during my time at Comic Book, it wouldn't be mine. Mm-hmm. And when I did it the first time, I had so much fun doing it. The community that I was able to grow around it, I absolutely loved. And I thought about it once a year. Maybe this is the year I do it. I really miss doing it. I want to be able to do this. I couldn't bring myself to make it happen. And so when I started at Image, Eric had said, we had a podcast. We'd love to bring a podcast back. Would you do it? You have experience doing it. And I said, yeah, sure. But let me pitch you this. Can I bring back my old podcast? And can it still be mine.
Can I creator own that whole podcast?
Let's Talk Comics is the podcast version of the Image deal at Image.
Yeah.
And it's why, for them to let me do it that way and still get to, and look, they don't, no one at Image tells me who I have to talk to or who I can or can't talk to. I can talk to whoever I want. And I have a guest list coming up, people who are very much outside of the Image space. Am I talking to people who all have books at Image right now? Yeah, absolutely. But like, these are, I don't shy away from any of the work that they've done previously. We talk about their Marvel work. We talk about any of their other work for hire stuff and the challenges and stuff that come from it. And so it's not, but is there time reserved at the end for their upcoming Image book? Yeah, but it makes sense because because everything that they've done to this point leads to this.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think people would come to Let's Talk Comics to hear about Image books. I think that's fair, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But like, But like, we were just talking about, like, Cody Rhodes is going to be on the show, and like, we're going to talk about nerding out and his love of just geek culture and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
And so I can do stuff like that too. I could look, if I want to go talk to James Gunn about comics and DC or whatever, I can go do it. It's fine. And believe me, I'm going to try it. Right? I'm
going to definitely try to do that.
If I can make that happen, I will. Because look, at the end of the day, here's what's going to happen. If I can book James Gunn as a guest on my show, that's going to bring a lot of people to the show.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what my hope is? Is that they go, wow, this show's pretty good. Let me go check out some other episodes. You know what they're going to find? A bunch of fucking Image product.
Yeah, that's right. You just unlocked our marketing strategy as well. Wow, this Tom King interview is really cool. Let's see what else. Let's see who else they've talked to.
Yeah,
exactly.
That is the aim of the game. And if you don't get it, then you're in the wrong fucking business. Okay?
Yeah, you've pretty much set me up perfectly for my next question. And it totally was about sort of the beginnings of reinvigorating the Let's Talk Comic brand. And you sort of talked about it here just a moment ago, but here are some of the guests that Jim's had on the show recently. So you've got Rick Vermender, Jason Aaron, Kyle Higgins, Marjorie Liu, Juni Ba, and Mahmoud Alsrar. Okay, yep. Just make sure. Yeah. Okay. So and I actually prepared everyone. So if you're listening now, I prepared a little clip. Here is Jim talking to Marjorie Liu here just a couple weeks ago.
Oh God.
And then I watched the X-Men cartoon on Fox, and I think as many people did in the '90s, and I was like, oh shit, this is the X-Men. This is what everyone's been talking about, and I didn't understand. Like, oh fuck me, because it was so good. It was the most amazing thing I had seen ever.
My whole point in showing that is basically awesome job. Talking to Marjorie. Honestly, all these interviews are incredible. But also, and you sort of already spoke on it, so I'm just going to sort of elaborate here as well. I'm going to spin my wheels, but the amount of talent you've had on the show is incredible. You talk to any podcaster, especially in the podcasting space, they'll tell you, and we're at a point of privilege, I think, with the Oblivion Bar. We've had a lot of great guests on recently. We've made great connections with a lot of publishers, including Image. Shout out to Kat. Shout out to Kat. Both Cats, actually, K and C. So we've got that in our tool belt. You, on the other hand, have a rocket launcher strapped to your back, and you're just gliding above all of us that have been doing this thing for, we started the podcast in April of 2020, so this is our 5th year. But my gosh, I mean, Jim, I have a question.
I had a little bit of a head start.
But no, I know, and I'm not trying to downplay the beginnings of Let's Talk Comics, but I want to reiterate that my whole point in saying all this was the sky's the limit with Let's Talk Comics.
Yeah.
You do a fabulous job talking to these creators, but also, again, the reach is phenomenal.
Look, here's how I see it, because I recognize that in a sense, right? I am always a believer that we were just kind of talking about it, right? Mediocre content is that the people are tired of that, right? Mm-hmm. But when people find the good stuff, they will stick with it and they will love it. And I think the comic book podcasts they're in the very same boat, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that you guys have been able to do is show that you guys do an immense amount of preparation for your stuff, and you guys are also good at thinking on your feet. And like, that's something that I think I've told this to every person I ever had do interviews at comicbook.com. I said, if you are reading your questions off of a list, you will fail. Mm-hmm. If you only stick to that list, you're fucked. Because you can't say, oh, well, how did you prepare for this role? And then have them answer the question and then say, what was it like working with so-and-so? Because there's a good chance they're going to tell you what it was like working with someone. And if you're not immediately off the bats trying to come up with a follow-up to that question to at least thread you to your next one, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. Right? And like, look, but that's a skill that you have to learn. And the only way you can learn is by listening, by taking in good examples of what you're trying to do. Chris Van Vliet is a big wrestling podcaster. He got his start doing junkets and Hollywood junkets for one of the television networks or whatever. Mm-hmm. Has to be, in my opinion, hands down, one of the best interviewers in the game. I listened to every single one of his episodes, not because I'm a wrestling fan, but because I want to learn from him. Right? My hope in doing Let's Talk Comics is that not only do I happen to get access to some pretty big names. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But my hope is that if someone then likes an interview with, say, Marjorie Liu, or likes an interview with Jason Aaron, and they say, wow, that guy's pretty cool. Not me, Jason. Mm-hmm. If they go looking for other Jason Aaron interviews, my hope is that they find another good one. Right? And because that was how Let's Talk Comics got started, in the sense where I have to get. I should say this because it may come up and they're going to listen to this, and I have to say it all the time. I give all of the credit for the starting point of me in this industry to the iFanboy podcast. If it wasn't
the root of a lot of us,
if it wasn't for Ron, Josh, and Connor putting in a good word for some dumb Long Island kid who was going to school in the city, who needed an internship at Marvel, and wanted to intern at Marvel, I have a very different story. Mm-hmm. Right? But they were doing creator interviews that were so good that I wanted to listen to more interviews. And at the time, there weren't that many, right? You had iFanboy, you had Comic Geek Speak, you had John Suntres doing Word Balloon, and like that was kind of it in a sense.
Those are the OGs right there.
Those are the OGs, and so I started Let's Talk Comics to hopefully be another place where people could go, in a sense, to find another interview or listen to something else. Fortunately, I was able to grow it, and like now it's my hope that in what I get to do with Let's Talk Comics is that, like, hopefully it either inspires someone to do it better than me, and say, fuck you, Jim, I'm going to do it better, just you wait and see.
Which would be the Image Way, by the way.
Which would be the Image Way. Or more podcasts get a spotlight, because then people want to go see and search more, right? Mm-hmm. Because podcasts, as prevalent as they are in pop culture, in a sense, right, as big as they are, they still feel niche in a sense.
They're still niche-y, yeah. Because
here's the thing. Here's what makes a good podcast. A good one feels intimate, and when you're listening to it, it feels personal. It feels like you're in the room with whoever the hosts are in the show, and you're hanging out with them, right? And more often than not, fans and listeners don't necessarily feel not the need to want to like go tell someone else about a podcast that they found or whatever, but because that experiences can be so singular to a person in a sense, it's a special thing, right? In that comic book podcasters, in the way that in the subject that we talk about and the people we talk to about them, is just as important as the books themselves, in a sense. Because the good comic book podcasters are good storytellers. And good stories, inevitably at the end of the day, is all anyone wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny you say all that. I'm so glad you said this, because one of the things I was going to ask you, or at least comment on during our conversation, this is the exact thing that I had in my transcript. something I really enjoy about your show and your interview style is you give the creator space to talk. There are some stammers, a little bit of dead air, maybe some curse words. Looking at you, Marjorie, again. Refer back to the clip a moment ago. But it makes it an intimate, authentic listening experience. And I think that's so important. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad that that's the goal with Let's Talk Comics.
Yeah.
I have the unfortunate reaction to over-edit sometimes, and it's something that I know is a problem, and I'm trying to work on that, but it's something I really love about what you do over on your show.
Right. It's a choice. I make the choice because what it forces me to do is I have become a better public speaker because of it. Because I listen to every single one of my episodes, God, 4 times, twice during the edit, once after the fact. Yep. Where did I stammer? How many times did I say like? How many times did I say or whatever, right?
I can see an on an audio track before I even get to it.
100%, right. But what you'll find is the more I go on, the less it happens. Mm-hmm. And I am who I am, warts and all, but like I don't ever want the ums and the uhs and the pauses or whatever to be distracting. And so for me, I feel like I do it a lot less now, only because I put a lot of work in up front. But there are a lot of podcasts out there that cut a lot of that out. And to me, they feel a little bit less authentic, right? In that, like,
right?
In that the podcast is a product, and like, yes, it's a product, but if the product is more important than the content, then I think that's where you begin to have some issues.
Sure.
Because the content is the product, not the podcast itself. The podcast itself is the vehicle.
Yeah, I guess the way I defend the over editing, and I hope everyone listening right now, please let me know if I'm mistaken here. I want it to be if this is your first time listening to the Oblivion Bar, you go, damn, what a well produced show. Like, that was an easy listen. You know, there weren't a ton of like. For me, and I'm trying to think of an example, David Harper, for instance, over at Off Panel, who very similar to iFanboy was, and David, if he's listening, he's a good friend of the show. For some reason, you're listening right now, you're going to turn red, I'm sure, because I'm about to brag on you. The quality of that show is so great because it feels like it's a smooth question asked, question answered, responses, rebuttal, question asked, so on and so forth. It feels all very natural, even though if you've edited a podcast, I can see when I listen to him, I'm like, I know David is editing something here. I know he's editing something here. Yep. Yeah. So that's sort of the goal, right?
Yeah. But I think but the biggest difference though in David's show, and David's got a phenomenal show, is that the conversations are still authentic, right? Like it's not question answer like someone's reading them off a card.
Sure.
It's question and it's follow up and is it a bit more clipped? Yeah, sure. But that's not necessarily to say that is a detriment to that show, because like I said, he's been doing it 400 plus something episodes. Like, God bless him. I think he and I started at around the same time, and I dipped when I started comic book, and he kept going, and God bless him for that.
Yep.
But there's a reason why he's so good, and there's a reason why he's one of the best comic book podcasts that are out there. Eisner nominated because he's authentic in a sense, right? And like I feel like that there is always sometimes a need to feel that you always want to come to something like this well prepared, right? But it's okay to not know something. And I think the minute that like that either comes up or happens during something, someone immediately thinks that is something that I don't want someone to see, and it's something I should be ashamed of in a sense. And it all depends on context and things like that, where like sometimes I will get chronological things wrong with a creator's work, and I just keep going. Like, could I have gone back to edit it and re-ask the question or whatever? Yeah, sure. No, I just acknowledge it and I keep going. I go, yep, nope, you're right. I was wrong. That doesn't make me any less prepared because I'm so much more prepared for everything else.
Yeah.
And like, that's fine. It happens. But yeah, no, but to your point, I leave a lot of the ugly in there, but I think that there is something to be said in letting the creators talk and letting them share their stories. And it's my job as the host to just keep us on track and and continue the journey, right? And so thank you for noticing that, because it's it's one of those because it's one of those things where it's like people are going to think I'm just lazy as shit and I don't want to edit the ums and uhs out of my podcast. I was like, no, I think that's part of the allure.
No, absolutely it is 100%. I absolutely. It kind of feels like you're sitting in on a conversation, which in one hand I think is sort of the appeal of a podcast, right?
Right.
And I think I have a question here for you, but I also want to go back a little bit here.
Yep.
We were talking about iFanboy and David and sort of their work in the medium. Are there any podcasts, any comic journalists, anybody that you sort of maybe not try to emulate necessarily, but someone that you notice their quality and you go, you know what, I want to take this and sort of attribute it to Let's Talk Comics, or I want to, go ahead.
What Chris Van Vliet does is I would love to be the Chris Van Vliet of comic book podcasts in a sense,
okay.
Right? My format is my format. It's the format that I had 10 years ago. It's the format that I have today. It is a walk down memory lane. It is talking about the early part of someone's career, the middle part of their career, roadblocks that they came across, any funny stories that they have kind of along the way. The last third of it, then it usually takes a turn towards craft and in the storytelling process and putting stuff together, taking what they've learned over the course of their career, how do they apply it, and then we talk about the new project at large, and then we send everybody home. That structure for me has been what it is. Could I allow for a bit more flexibility? I think so. The other thing that I do that I may start changing up is I usually only talk to one creator at a time. I don't talk to creative teams. I don't talk to multiple people at the same time because one, the shows are long enough already, and I never know when I may get the opportunity to talk to said creator again. And so I do it because I really want that episode for whoever I'm talking to be, not to be the definitive oral history of said creator, but I want it to be close, right? There's a bonus episode that's launching the Wednesday that Bug Wars comes out, which as we're recording this, it comes out tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. When I did the episode with Jason, I had asked him about the research he had done for bugs, the bugs in the book and things like that, and he had some pretty funny anecdotes and things like that. And I thought to myself, how fun would it be to put Jason in a room with an entomologist? And an entomologist, for those looking up the word in their phone dictionary right now, is a professor of bugs, basically. And so I reached out to a few. And I happened to hear back. One of the first ones I heard back from was Dr. Adrian Smith. He's the head of the biological bug stuff at North Carolina State, and he runs the that part of the Natural History Museum that they have over there. He also happens to be a giant Jason Aaron fan. And so this morning,
as he should be,
and this morning I put the two of them on a Zoom, and I framed it as a bonus episode of the show. I asked maybe 2 or 3 questions to just get them started, and then the two of them just started talking to one another, and it was phenomenal. It's one of
Jim. Those are my favorite interviews where I can. This is a good example of this, and I mean this as a total compliment, where I can say my question and then just shut up,
get the fuck out of the way.
It's my favorite thing.
That's it. That's how they should be. Right?
Yeah.
Again, right? It's
no one's here to hear me talk. They hear me talk enough on the show, especially during interviews. If you want to hear me talk, go listen to our Flash movie review. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, 100%. And so that hits tomorrow, and it's a very different kind of show than I normally do. I'm very curious to see how people react to it. I'm sure people are going to love it, and then I'm going to get stuck doing it for doing this kind of thing for a whole bunch of other different things. But that's fine. That's fine, right? That's why we do what we do. But really, it's at the core of it. My show is a chat. It's an interview show, and so. Anything I would take from another podcast is more just how to make the conversation better. That's what I listen to. That's what I listen for.
Which, to speak on what you were saying a moment ago, you could attribute that to any great interviewer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a great podcast, a great comic book podcaster, right?
Right.
I actually call this my Ram, or Rom, however you want to say his name, my Rom V rule, right? And it's the way I approach interviewing today in 2025 for the Oblivion Bar is that I try to listen to at least 2 episodes of an interview, or 2 interviews before I have them on the show.
Yep.
And then I try to ask them questions that they haven't often been asked, because when we had Rom on the show, and this was such a great lesson, and he was so respectful. I'm not trying to make it sound like he was a dick or anything, but he just didn't want to explain his work at all. Like, he just didn't want to talk. He didn't want to like explain Dawn Runner to me, which I now I get, right? At the time I was like, so I see a little bit of Evangelion here. I see a little bit of Pacific Rim, maybe, tell me your process there. And he's like, without saying it, he was like, no, I wrote it. I put it out there. I had Evan Cagle draw some of the most beautiful artwork you've ever seen in your entire life. We put it out there, and now it is yours. I don't explain anything. You take what you want from it. And then that just like total mind explosion. It was a total mind effort, because they're going forward. I was like, you know what? When I talk to a creator, I'm no longer going to be asking them the boilerplate process questions and all that. I want to ask them questions they haven't been asked before. And that has been my goal ever since. And it's worked out really well.
I'm going to let you know a little secret. That's the fucking cheat code. And that's how easy it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People don't realize it. People don't, like, it's all you have to do is put in, and I'm not saying that like doing the homework is not a lot of work, because it can be, right? Especially if someone hasn't been interviewed in a while or whatever. But like, that's step one. That's the cheat code. That's what the people you're talking to want. They don't want to answer the same questions that they've been asked 45 different times.
What's the one Marvel character you could write?
Right. They don't. No, yeah. If you could write for Marvel, what character do you want to write? They don't give a fuck.
They don't care.
No.
Who's paying them right now? Like.
And so. Yeah, like that's it. Like that's the secret. Like we're really like, well, how do you like? Why is your podcast so good? I don't know. I ask different questions. I don't ask the same question that everyone asks.
Right.
That's it. That's all you have to do.
The last time we had Tom King on the show, I was trying so hard to get him just to admit that he's a liberal, and he just wouldn't do it. I'm like, listen, Tom, I've read Animal Pound, okay? I've read Wonder Woman, all right? I get what you're saying. I'm reading it. I'm seeing it, okay? Just admit it, And he just, and I get why. I'm just joking. I wasn't trying to get him to do it, but like without asking.
Sure.
But it's the most fun, honestly. When I first started doing the Oblivion Bar, and I don't know if you ever felt like this throughout your entire career of podcasting or journalism or what have you, but when our first interview on the podcast was Philip Kennedy Johnson, who at that time was just about to start Superman and Aliens. And I remember being so incredibly nervous. And this is a guy who, I mean this respectfully, at that time hadn't done a ton. He had done The Last God. He had done that one book, The Last Sons of America. I think it was over at Boom. Like, he'd done a couple books, but he wasn't Philip Kennedy Johnson that is today.
Sure.
But I was so nervous. And I put these guys, I say guys sort of broadly, I put these people on a pedestal because of my love of the medium, how much I love comics. But what I learned in that conversation, what I continued to learn very quickly throughout this process, and if there's any podcasters listening to this, I hope you take this and sort of run with it. These are just talented nerds, These are just people. They're talented nerds. That's all they are. So, and they want to be treated as such. Like, they want to be treated as normal people. You you compliment them too much, or if you I see it, because I also sidebar, Jim, is that when I work at comic conventions, I work for a company called Comic Sketch Art. I run their whatnot shows. I sort of do the hosting, and I talk to the creator. I talk to the people at home, back and forth, and a lot of times when those folks get on camera, all they want to do is talk about their work in the most casual way possible. Not even like interview questions necessarily. They just want to talk with people who get it, who like this shit, you know? And that's essentially, I think, what you're doing really, really well. What I hope we're doing, in a similar way. That's what this is all about.
Yep.
Yeah.
I tell you what, the one thing that you guys have going for you, in addition to the multitude of things I think you guys have going for you, is you understand the social media game, and a lot of people don't. Right? I think you cut out smart clips. You do a great job of packaging all of that stuff. It looks good, right? Like, and that's hard. That's a big barrier for a lot of folks to kind of get through. And so for you guys to do it at the level that you're doing it that's where I think the extra kudos needs to go.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely been a labor of love to try to get into all that in the sort of murky landscape that we're currently in with social media and sort of we're both from the era of like the Twitter town hall sort of time frame where
you only needed to go to one place and that was it.
Right.
Everyone was there. Now everyone's in 45 different fucking places. None of it makes an impact. Why the fuck do we do it? Like it makes why? Why do we do it?
And to speak of what you're saying, like now I get good at this. Now that we're all on 7 platforms, now I learn how to
great.
do these
I
things.
figured it out now that no one's fucking here. Great.
Right. Yeah, I make the best clip I've ever made in my life, and it gets 400 views and 17 likes. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Very cool. Good deal. I had this incredible conversation with John J. Pearson and Michael Conrad, and it gets 70 views on YouTube. I'm like, okay, great. But we're not going to make this about my self-loathing with the podcast. Jim, you have been so gracious with your time. We're over just an hour here, and I told you I was going to keep you for like 45. So I want to ask you. We're having a good time. I hope
we're having a great time.
Yeah, I want to ask you one final question. This is something we always ask everyone that comes on the show. Is there some form of media, comic, movie, video game, podcast, whatever, that you've really been loving and you want to sort of share with the listener?
If my wife had her way, Marvel Rivals would never have been released.
Top 3 characters, go.
It has taken over my life in a way that's bordering on unhealthy.
Uh-huh.
I fucking love that game. And I played a bunch of Overwatch. There is just something else. It honestly, it is it's that Marvel touch. It's you get to play as heroes that you like, and the play styles are so unique and different and whatever. I don't have top 3 characters. Oh, my top 3 characters, I'll pick one per class. My strategist, aka healer, is probably Sue Storm right now, but I'm getting a lot better with Loki, and I think Loki's probably the best, has the highest ceiling for healer in the game, and so I want to get better at Loki. But if I'm not playing Sue Storm, I'm probably playing Cloak and Dagger in that point. So they got that. I am incredibly lucky that in the duelist role, your DPS role, my favorite character happens to be the best one the best one I'm with, and that's Moon Knight.
Okay.
And I know Moon Knight mains get a lot of shit because you're just aiming at the ground and hitting people and whatever. That's fine. Whatever. There is strategy to be held with Moon Knight. If you're flanking the right way, your Ankh placement needs to be on point. Look, here's the thing. If you let's say you pick a different character or whatever, and the other team has a Loki, and there's not a Moon Knight on your team, like each one of those Loki dupes, those are free Ankhs because people are going to be standing around them trying to heal, and you're going to be getting extra hits. Yeah. So if there's a Loki on the other team and you're not playing Moon Knight, you're passing up a good time. My tank is I'm mostly a Penny Parker tank. I am learning to get better with Groot, and my dive tank of choice, like if someone is Groot or Penny and we need another tank on the team, my dive tank is Thor. And like the fact that I even know what a dive tank is than anything else means my
invested.
Instagram algorithm knows my sickness and is feeding it, and I'm watching too many. Here's how top 500 players play this character, and I go, I could do that.
Right.
Marvel Rivals is 100% the thing. And then, like, if my kid's in the room, she's like, what? She goes, how come you're not Jeff? How come you're not Squirrel Girl? I'm like, I'll play Squirrel Girl all day. She's my number 2 DPS because, again, like, I suck with aim. Like I can't be Star-Lord. I can't be Punisher. I can't be any of those characters that require too much aim because I'm terrible at it. But like
I was getting owned by Squirrel Girl the other day when I was playing it.
Throw exploding acorns that I could just lob into a doorway and not let people get out.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I love it.
When I hopped on the other day, because I've only played maybe once or twice, I really enjoyed it too. Yeah, as I say, I've like purposefully, and I've thought about it a couple times too. I was like, I have a little free time today. I've already edited the show. Why don't I go and hop on Rivals?
That's the beauty of it. You can get in and out, and that's what. Like, I mean, before that, like, I was a pretty big Fortnite player for a while. But to me, I'm such a social gamer that I can't play Marvel Rivals by myself. I have to be playing with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be playing with a friend. Otherwise, I just get bored with it. I am. But that's how I've always been. I've always been the. I go back to the original Xbox and that Halo, right? If my best friend wasn't sitting there next to me doing co-op Halo, I'm not finishing that story. I'm not finishing that fight. Fuck it.
We're gonna be telling our grandkids about LAN parties when we get older.
Oh my god,
That's gonna be a fond pillar memory when we get older.
That's one of the things that, like, God bless Nintendo for, because it's the only console left that really encourages that couch co-op, basically.
Yeah.
Because my kid loves playing Kirby. We play a lot of Mario Party, and without the Switch, I don't get to have that experience with her in a sense. We do play a lot of Minecraft too.
That's my game right there. That's if I'm. I love a video game here and there, but to sort of speak on Rivals, I purposely keep it at arm's distance because I will lose myself to it.
Right.
So what I like to do is when I do have that itch to play a video game, a lot of times it's Minecraft, where I'll play it obsessively for 5 days and then I'll put it down for 6 months and then come back to it at some point. But when I played Rivals, it was Punisher and Winter Soldier for me, but I don't have like the class knowledge. I don't understand the strategy yet. But I had a good time playing with Punisher, and I like the Gallet gun that you can eventually get when you play as him. Yeah, so I need to hop on more. But Jim, what a pleasure it was having you here on the Oblivion Bar Podcast. Again, as we were sort of talking about throughout this conversation, not only am I thrilled to have another comic book podcast here in the landscape, but it's great to have you at the helm of, again, one of the better ones. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I'm not just saying that because you're right here in front of me. So, it's truly a pleasure to have you here.
God, what a fucking blowhard that guy was.
Everyone, I'm happy to, and again, longtime listeners of the podcast will know this. I'm usually the long-winded one. So it's nice to have someone on here who's more long-winded than me. And again, I mean that in the most respectful way possible.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to say, and I'm going to get, I need to get salesman-y for a second. Again, I did a little bit beforehand, but the one thing that I would love to just encourage people to do that I don't think enough people do often enough is go to your local comic book shop whenever you go to pick up your new books or whatever. Pick up just one book that you wouldn't have necessarily thought to pick up. My hope is that you pick up a good book. And if you want to err on the side of caution, you pick up an image book. But
just look for that eye.
But yeah, right, exactly. But it's the only way this industry grows at that level, because so often will we get caught in I only read Spider-Man books, I only read Batman books, I only read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Transformers. Right? I'm guilty. We make Transformers, and don't necessarily branch out. If you're not, like, maybe you think you're not into horror books, try one. I mean, it's not like you're going to get jump scares or anything. Will something be a little creepy and gross? Yeah, maybe. But it's like, it's not, there's no jump scares or anything that you would get in a movie.
It's all visceral.
But here's a perfect example, right? Ice Cream Man that we put out is hands down. I don't think anyone would argue with me on this. Is hands down the best horror book you can get on in comic book form.
And that last issue was incredible. That Zoe Thorogood story was so great.
I mean, and he does such. It's an anthology book in a sense, right? It's a bunch of short stories and things like that. But the thing is like what he's able to do with the comic book as the medium in that book is unlike anything else you're going to get in a Batman book or a Spider-Man book. And so, like, yes, would I prefer that someone go pick up an image book? Absolutely. But I think unless you take a chance on something, you don't have to do it every week. Do it once a month to start, right? Take the chance on something that you wouldn't necessarily have thought to pick up and see if you like it. And if you don't, you're out $3 for them if you do it 1 month. But it's those chances that keep this business alive, that keep the dreams alive. And I think it's one of the most important aspects of this hobby that we love. And so if you want a chance to support it outside of your DC and Marvel books, just try something.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I'll sort of end it here, is that that's how I found Saga. One day I went into the comic shop, just picked up a Image First, which, by the way, are we ever going to get those back? Can we get the Image First back?
Look, are they back? If your comic shop is empty on them, tell them to order more. There's plenty.
Okay, all right. I haven't seen them in a bit, so I was just wondering. But I picked up an Image First of Saga, and now Saga is my all-time favorite comic.
Yep.
Brian is my favorite all-time writer. I had the very distinct fortune of having him on the show to talk about Saga. Like, it all was built from that one random day of picking up one random comic, and now it's all, the rest is history. So once again, Jim, what a pleasure it was having you here on the show. Before I let you go, though, how can the folks follow you? Give us one last pitch for Let's Talk Comics, all the things.
Jim Viscardi everywhere. Let's Talk Comics everywhere. At Image Comics everywhere. Follow me there. If you like very long creator conversations, Let's Talk Comics is the show for you. Yeah. If you are, the show is for people who want to aspire to be in the business in some creative form or fashion. As I continue on, I will have more guests of different positions within the business. I plan on talking to some of my favorite episodes in my first run were talking to editors. Good God, this industry needs another Steve Wacker like no one else. That guy was one of the best. Colorists, etc. Like the first couple have been front loaded with some writers. I just had Juni Ba on, who is, if you're a DC fan, you may have picked up his Boy Wonder, which was a phenomenal book. He has a new book coming out, the second in a series called the Monkey Batch, Monkey Meat, Summer Batch. Mm-hmm. Again, that's a writer artist combo double threat that is just crushing it, doing all kinds of weird and very cool things.
There's only one Juni Ba.
Mahmoud Asrar I just had on. You get to hear from a comic nerd entomologist tomorrow. So that's the show. When I start, and I swear I'm gonna shut up in a second. When we brought it back, I told Kat at Image, who heads up our PR, I said, "All right, I think I have time in my schedule to do it twice a month." And I'm like, I don't want to go too hard too fast. And I'm closing in on 4 weeks, and I have 7 episodes in the can. So
yep,
good job, Jim. Great.
Isn't that what we do, though, right? As podcasters, we overload ourselves.
It's a drug.
Until it's stressful, but it's always rewarding when it's all done, when it's out there.
But, dude, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I haven't done one of these in a while, and you made it real easy, so thank you.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully, sometime down the road, we can get back on either your show, my show, or otherwise. So
we'll do it.
Yeah, it'd be an honor.
It's only fair if we do a podcast swap. I'll have you on the show at some point. I promise.
Don't threaten me with a good time. All right. All right, Jim. Well, I appreciate you. We'll talk to you next time. Okay.
Talk to you, bud.